Selwyn here from WynnStrength.com, bringing you the second day of week 6 of the Darkhorse training program by Brian Alsruhe. Like usual, I'll leave links below for the original video where Brian Alsruhe goes over the program, the structure, the outline, and exactly how to do the program, the ins and outs of it, and the specific details of why he sets things up as the way he does. Really great video. I highly recommend watching it, as well as the LiftBolt website where they have taken the information from that video and put it into a free Google spreadsheet, so you don't have to do any of that Excel magician work. It just plugs it in there, just throw in your numbers, throw in the movements you want to do, and away you go. Super simple. Highly recommend that website too. So the second day of the last week of the second phase brings us with upper body pushing and pulling, focus obviously on bench press and overhead press. We open up with some barbell rowing, floating barbell rows with some pin bench pressing. This week I was focusing on keeping a slightly more horizontal, more 45-degree angle for that back, trying to touch a little bit higher than the belly button. Where you touch on the torso for the barbell row is probably going to dictate the angle of the back that you're going to use. Anywhere below the belly button, you're probably going to have a higher back angle, and anything above that belly button towards the chest, you're going to have a more horizontal back angle. I would argue that neither is more right than the other, but on that note, I would say don't ignore one or the other. Do all of them, because we have a lifetime to train, so incorporate different angles across different time frames and different phases of training. Just like the pendlay row and the barbell row, there are different tools for different techniques. They all elicit different training stimuli and different muscle adaptations. So sticking with 45 degrees and then try closer to 90 degrees and then even higher than 45 degrees. So we're getting different parts of the lat stimulated, different parts of the back stimulated, and as well as keeping those erectors strong at different levels, making sure we're holding that back in that static position for each and every rep. That way we're just getting a little bit more. We're getting all the variety that we could possibly need out of the barbell rows. If you have access to seated cable rows, lat machines, lat pull-down machines, literally everything, throw them in there, because variety is good for accessory movements, I think. I would argue that if you have access to more equipment is always going to be better than access to fewer equipment, just because it gives us more options, more ways and more tools in the tool belt to stimulate muscle growth and to stimulate hypertrophy and strength. Just like a mechanic can't work on many cars with one wrench, could barely do one job with one wrench, like a single wrench, not even an adjustable one. The more tools we have, the more abilities we have, and the more routes that we can do, the more options we have when trying to fix a problem. So don't look at different exercises as better than the other exercises. Think of them as different tools to attack different problems, depending on the goals and depending on what you're trying to achieve, where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are. Different exercises are going to be great for some things and not great for others. If you can only squat because you only have a barbell and a squat stand, back squat's probably going to be good for full leg development and full body development, whereas a front squat's probably going to be really good at isolating the quads and the abs. If you don't have access to a leg extension or a leg press, you have to do these things where we look at what tool is going to be good for the job with our available resources, and nothing's better than the other. They're just different options to attack different goals. So that being said, we hit 205 for our top 3 sets for the barbell row reps of 12. I think I kept my back angle relatively good, relatively horizontal than the previous week, so I think that's great. We kept stuck with the 12 reps rather than the 15. I wanted to push out a little bit extra weight. I felt like I wanted to attack some heavier weights today rather than rep out some more weights. From there, we move on to the pin bench press, which was 5 rep maxes. This was interesting. So we started off at 225 for 5. Then we did the next 2 sets at 240 for 5. They were probably close to RPE 8.5, then 9.5. I thought I could finish the third and final set at 240. We stopped it after 3. I couldn't finish the last 2. I'll throw in the video. I tried to throw out 225 and couldn't push that up either. Just complete muscle fatigue. I was just gassed at this point of the day. So nothing much we could do there. I deloaded the weight and called it a day for the max effort work. At least we got that 240. And just wrapped up with abs, some V-ups, and then some sandbag throws. I'm really enjoying that combination of ab and conditioning movement. It's just fun throwing something around. Try and incorporate some sort of dynamic throwing thing just because it's fun to do. We followed that up with some volume work. We only did 2 out of the 3 sets. So barbell rows, we dropped that from 205 down to 145 pounds, but we increased the reps from 12 to, first it was 14, second set was 15, so we did lighten the load, but then increase the reps, so I think that was a good compromise there, with the volume again focusing on more time under tension, more hypertrophy, more blood flow, rather than some heavier weights. Next up was the pin bench press, again dropping that weight. We did 185 opening set, we got 11. The second and final set was only 8, so again, different kind of fatigue thing setting in there. Conditioning, my poor conditioning is showing up again. Just like usual with these movements, I was trying to keep an eye on the rest. I kind of timed out a little bit more, so we did keep total workout today was actually only an hour and 17 minutes, which is a really good result considering how long the previous workouts have been taking. That being said, that does mean that my rest periods were a lot shorter, and I was trying to not have as much transition time between each movement, so that's probably why I failed a couple of these movements. I would argue that is the reason why, just the poor conditioning kicking in there. I wasn't able to recover as well. From there, we move on to our dynamic movement for today, which was the overhead press. I tried for 105 pounds, you'll see here with the opening set, and it just wasn't moving that well. The barbell was moving slowly and my back was really arching out of position. I didn't think it was worth it to push on with that 105, so I did drop out to 95 pounds, just took 10 pounds off the bar. Felt a lot better. I could feel the speed really wasn't perfectly there, but it was there. It was better than the 105, and I think that was an acceptable range. 95 was what I did 2 weeks ago. So I think given the shorter rest periods, it was a good compromise to keep the program within that time frame and to keep that good muscle stimulus, make sure that speed was relatively there and the technique was still paramount to this movement, to this part of the program, making sure that my speed during the press, I was trying to drive up explosively as I could. All things considered, my overhead press is the weakest lift that I have technically and strength wise, so both of those things I'm really trying to bring this up, especially with my newfound interest in the sport of strongman and that style of lifting. Overhead pressing is huge in the sport, so I really need to focus on getting that better, getting that technique in, getting strong at it, just in general, just getting better. And usually the best way to get better at something is to do more of it, so I just need to do more reps, get more practice in. So that's what I'm trying to do, get better at, watch more videos, try and learn, try to critique my own form. But we were able to do the every minute on the minute. We hit 3 reps all the way across at the 95, and we did keep it within that 10-minute mark. So that was a good result for that part of the day. And that brings us to about halfway through the program. We're wrapping things up again. We're about to enter in a rest week next week, and I think following day 1 where things were starting to fail, I think it's again it's a repetition of the last week of the first phase where things started to show some signs of fatigue, show my inability to recover from the stress of the previous 3 weeks or the previous 2 weeks. So I think what the program has is a really well-timed rest and deload week, where some programs will pull you out to 5 weeks. I think because this program is so dense and so intense, I think every 4 weeks is a good time frame to throw in that deload week, because we are showing signs of poor performance. And that's one thing to think about when you are looking at your own training program. If you are trying to develop your own program or think about your own training, when is it right to throw in a deload week? Or when should you throw in a rest week? Before I did this program, I would recommend every 4 weeks. So do 4 weeks on and then 1 week of rest. And that, again, depends on your style of training. If you're doing heavy training, so you're focusing in the 5 reps and under, definitely I would say 3 to 4 weeks. Every 3 to 4 weeks is a great time frame to do a rest week. If you're doing lighter, more hypertrophic style training, then you could probably bump that out to every 6 weeks, every 2 months. From my own personal experience, when you are doing that hypertrophy style training, it's less stressful in an accumulated sense, because we're doing each body part once a week. So that's another factor that throws in there, where now we're doing pretty much full body workouts. Well, if we're doing an upper body, lower body split, but we're kind of incorporating the entire body each and every day because of the way the movements are structured. Bench press, full body movement with a pec, tricep focus. I would argue that the barbell row definitely incorporates the entire body, because we're having to stand there and balance the weight. The hamstrings are engaged, the feet, the calves, everything is engaged there to make sure the weight moves as it should. So when you're doing more full body workouts and with heavier weights, I would argue that you need to pay more attention to when you do the deload and rest weeks. It's more important to factor that in and actually have a structure point where you do plug those rest weeks in there, because when you kind of ignore that, a sign is disinterest in training. I would say would probably be the first one. You're like, I really don't want to train today, and that's just not for one day, because we all have those ups and down days. But when you have like a whole week of training where you kind of like, I really don't want to work out today, I'm really dreading doing my squats today, I'm really dreading doing my deadlifts tomorrow, I'm really dreading doing all the movements, maybe it's not a sign that you're over powerlifting or over weightlifting. It's probably a sign that you're probably close to needing a rest and recovery week, because your brain is probably a good indicator. Your thoughts becomes your actions, but your thoughts are probably indicative of what you've been doing over the last couple of weeks. And if you're inducing the body stress, then maybe you do need some rest and recovery to recover from that. Something to think about. Another thing to look at if you want a bit more of a subjective, or is it objective? One of the two. If you want more of a concrete way to look at it, once your numbers and performance starts to wane and fail as a good trend. So I know first day, the last couple of reps weren't as great, and today, second day, last couple of reps, the last couple of sets weren't that great. The weights weren't progressing up as they should for the dynamic effort based on the previous weeks. These are all signs that maybe I need to throw in a deload. I mean, if it wasn't structured in, because I know that next week is going to be a rest week. If it wasn't structured in and planned, these would be signs that I'd be thinking about taking a rest week, taking a deload. And maybe even if the program did have me doing a fourth week of work, maybe I would consider pushing that back and plugging in, substituting in a rest week. Everybody's different. Everyone's lifestyles are different, stress different. Everyone's an individual, so they have individual factors and circumstances to them. So how you recover is going to be different. But these are some signs that you can take and analyze. These are some signs you can take to analyze your own recovery and your own performance and your own thoughts to see if you need a rest week or if you can keep pushing away. And it's not a one-off thing. It should be a pattern. It should be a trend. You should see this over the course of your training week or the course of your last 2 training weeks. If it's a day where you bomb out, then that's an isolated incident, because that kind of happens here and there. If you try to push too hard, you feel too good, things of those nature where you're just overshooting for that day. But if you're repeatedly feeling like this, it's going to be a sign that you should probably back off, take the foot off the gas pedal and just coast for a little bit, and then come back mentally refreshed, physically refreshed after that rest week, and really hammer in again and just go nuts after that. And I think that's where a rest week is really good, where you can rest, take some time to regroup mentally and physically. And what should a rest week include? And that kind of depends on your style of training. If you're doing predominantly heavy strength training, you can either dial back. It really comes down to, do you not work? You can either not work out, you can dial back intensity, or dial back volume. And depending on your goals is going to depend on what you need to do. If you're working for 1 rep max strength, I would argue you would dial back the volume. So keep the weights. You would dial back intensity slightly and volume a lot. So do a lot less volume and maybe 10% of what you're doing before in terms of weights. If you're trying to do more hypertrophy style training, just in general, then maybe you dial back some of that intensity a lot more and just keep the volume up where you flip it. So I decrease the weight a lot, but only cut back volume by 10%. That way we're still working towards that goal, but we're not training it as hard as we normally do. We're not grinding ourselves into the ground. We're kind of giving ourselves time to breathe, giving our body time to recover without having to worry about suffering any effects of detraining or getting stale out of not moving. And finally, you could just not work out. If you can plan it, you can time it so your rest week or the end of a workout phase coincides with a vacation or a holiday or a special event or just time off work or something along those lines. Or even if you know you're going to have finals that week, if you're studying, maybe schedule in your rest week, figure out when those are, plan around that so that your rest week from the gym coincides with a stressful life event like finals or something along those lines. That way you're only focusing on one stressful event. You don't have to worry about going to the gym at all, and you don't feel guilty for not working out. You can not work out because it's planned in the program, it's a planned event where you're not working out. So think about those things when you are planning your own program, planning your own training, and just keep an eye on that. Make sure you're not overstressing and over-accumulating stress in the body, because we do need time to recover. We do need time to rest. So like usual, I'll leave a playlist here so you can catch up on the previous episodes of the Darkhorse training vlog. You can also stay up to date with how my progress is going in the future, as well as my final overview, thoughts, and conclusions about the program, and a final results video. This has been Selwyn from WynnStrength, and remember, a better life through strength.